You can have public speaking gifts. You can be comfortable in front of a crowd. You can get through a 30-minute talk with interesting things, and none of that necessarily is preaching. To preach is to preach the word. And I often say nowadays that a passion to preach without a discipline to study is just a desire to perform.
Nothing but the blood of Jesus.
Welcome to Encouraging the Pastor, a mini-series, a podcast from Together for the Gospel. And we have with us this morning as a special guest our brother H.B. Charles Jr. from Shiloh Metropolitan Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Florida.
It's a joy to be with you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, brother. The only reason you're not singing in my study right now is the people who are producing this video made me turn it off. Your voice, along with your choir, has been the background in my study ever since you sent me the old folks version, the CDs, back in June. Thank you for those very much, brother.
No worries.
Do you have like a whole separate career as a singing artist under another name?
No, I don't have a stage name for my music career. I write music, and I try to stick it into our services anywhere I can if the music guys let me. And after a certain while, we just try to collect it and make a record of it to share. Hopefully, it'll be an encouragement to others as it is to our church.
And what was the name of this last one?
The Lord Bless You. That was a benediction song that I wrote from Numbers 6:24 through 26.
Well, I just want to encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to be encouraged, get a copy of that album by whatever means you do that. I use CDs, but I know other people use mysterious things in the air and on their telephones. Anyway, however you get it, listen to it. It's excellent, very encouraging. Oh, yeah. I could just sit here and go on and on about it. The selection of the words. Do you often sing in your own services?
I
mean, obviously it's part of the congregation, but I mean, you know what I mean.
I do until my wife, Crystal, kind of fusses at me for doing too much of the music, but I enjoy singing along with the congregation. I'm sure that I'm the lead hymn singer as well in my congregation.
Well, man, I've been profiting from it. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So alongside singing, you do also preach.
Absolutely.
And you are known as a preacher.
Yes, sir.
And you at one point were a boy preacher.
I was.
You were preaching in your teen years.
Well, actually, I trusted Christ as a boy and surrendered to a call to preach at the age of 11. And I really bugged my father and the men to give me an opportunity, and they gave me 5 minutes at the end of a youth choir musical. I think they were just trying to say they gave me this opportunity to get me out of their hair. And I have been preaching pretty much ever since.
And HB, explain the story of how it is you became pastor of the church in Los Angeles.
Sure. So my father had served the church for 40 years. He passed rather suddenly, and there were no real transition plans whatsoever. He was an older man, but no one saw this sickness coming. And the church went 18 months without a pastor. And on the night that the church met, I showed up to cast my vote as a member of the church. And Dr. Evie Hill was leading the meeting. And it was by the stipulation of the leaders that they presented a name, but the church had heard so many people, they wanted to give the opportunity to let the church feel like they had a say. So they let them nominate names from the floor. And my name was presented from the floor. And I was...
and you were there?
I was there. Here's the other thing.
Oh.
I was there, and then they called everyone up alphabetically to vote. And when I came up to vote, one of the deacons objected because the bylaws of the church said you had to be 18 years old to vote. So I was not permitted to vote in the meeting, but I was on the ballot to be the pastor of the church. I was called to the church at 17, a senior at Los Angeles High School, and I served that church for 18 years.
So during your senior year of high school, which you continued to go to classes and attend, you were pastoring the name of the church again?
Mount Sinai Missionary Baptist Church.
So you were the pastor there your senior year of high school.
Yep. I was the pastor there at the senior. I had my senior year. I had I was pretty much down the road. I had 4 classes, so the end of lunch was the end of my day. But most often, the church schedules, for instance, a funeral or a meeting after my fourth period. So my wife was a couple of years behind me at Los Angeles High School, and if she like bumps into someone from those days and they say, "So what are you doing? You're married? Who did you marry?" And she says, "HB Charles." They may remember me by the name because I only have initials. But if they don't remember that, she's like, "Remember the cat that wore suits to school every day?" That's the second way I was known. I was in a black suit basically every day in my high school year because I was getting on to a funeral or something after I got through.
Wow. And the Lord evidently blessed the church through those years of ministry.
They richly did. I was as crazy as the story sounds. I was called to a church with a godly people and a praying people. And as you say that, I can hear ringing in my head members who said to me, "Junior," that's what they call me, not Reverend, "Junior, we didn't vote for you, but we are going to support you, and you are not going to fail under our watch." And they prayed for me, and they encouraged me. And
Oh,
I'm preaching right now through First Peter. I did that 25 years ago or better in Los Angeles, and I found like some of the notes from some of the messages, and I just want to go back and just apologize to them. It was just brutal, and they were so encouraging, and they encouraged me in my walk with the Lord, in my devotional life, in my preaching, and it was a long training for pastoral ministry.
but it sounds like you might want to write a little letter sometime later today and send it to that dear congregation
Yes.
with some fresh thanks.
I'm sorry.
No, brother. We're just encouraging them. What a good job they did in rearing you.
Sure. Well, also as well, I have gotten a chance to say thank you on multiple occasions. Most years pre-COVID, I've gone back basically every year and invited back to preach. And when my family talks about going to Los Angeles to see our family, we not only mean those we're physically related to, we also mean that church. They're family to us.
Amen. Well, brother, did that experience that you had as a young pastor, did that leave you with any particular wisdom you try to give young men who want to go into the preaching ministry? What's the advice you give to maybe a high school student or somebody who's 20 or 25 who comes up to you and they say, "Brother Charles, I really feel God's calling me into the pastoral ministry. What should I do?"
Sure. So I think the first thing that it needs to be said is that your life needs to be woven into the fabric of a local church. So my father raised preachers. It was one of the things he was known for. I can envision now many people who were before me, who even from that time, many of us are pastoring, many who also profess called to preach. And the church was no. The church kind of nurtured them. I just think you can't disconnect the call to preach from being woven into the fabric of life of the church. The second thing I would say is take any opportunity that you get to teach God's word. It is outside of the character matters, the one skill. I also think, this is the distinction between black church and white church. I have a lot of white friends, and they had a call to preach, and the church sent them to seminary, and they never preached until they were at the end of seminary or got out of seminary. And in our culture, a young man says he's called to preach, and the church just says, "Well, let's see," But I do feel like, yeah. So I do feel like, though, getting involved in the Sunday school, serving with the youth, getting involved in opportunities to teach, not sitting back waiting for Sunday morning. I think that's being responsible. I think the thing that my father instilled in us well was he laid upon us the discipline of weekly preparation. We, not without having weekly teaching responsibilities, we understood pretty early that to be called to preach is to make a commitment to prepare.
So
And
do you see young men around you in your own church right now being called to prepare like that?
I do. And there are some gifted young men around me. And I hope to lean on them the way my father leaned on me. Because I feel like you can have public speaking gifts. You can be comfortable in front of a crowd. You can get through a 30-minute talk with interesting things, and none of that necessarily is preaching. To preach is to preach the word. And I often say nowadays that a passion to preach without a discipline to study is just a desire to perform. And so I try to
Oh, that's good. A
lean
passion to preach without a discipline to study is just a
desire to perform.
desire to perform. Wow.
So I try to lean into the brothers about preparation. There are opportunities because of my schedule to preach, but this pretty much the stipulation throughout my ministry has been that I preach the guys who give me manuscripts. I want to see that they did the work and that they're not just in the pulpit filibustering. And I just think that's the hard work. But I feel like those who kind of shrink away from that hard work are making a statement about really what their commitment is.
So then, HB, let's go to your own preparation then, not in life generally, but like for a sermon. You say you're working on First Peter right now. You're preaching First Peter there in Jacksonville. In an average week, what does your preparation look like? I don't know if this is an average week, but if this is an average week, what does your preparation for preaching this coming Lord's Day look like?
Sure. So I am restless on Sundays. I don't know if I take Mondays off. I've kind of successfully gotten that rhythm in the midst of the coronavirus, but there's still, I don't know the word except to say adrenaline. I don't really get tired until Tuesday. So Sunday evening, I kind of start with my file, kind of organizing my file for the next week. I'm doing light reading, devotionally reading, rereading the text, messing around with translations on Monday. Tuesday, I'm kind of stepping it up with word studies, observations. I try to get to it on Wednesdays. Wednesday, I need to do whatever lifting I need to do for midweek. But Thursday is my full day of exegesis. I need to come out of Thursday knowing where my outline, I need to know where I'm going is the goal with the text. And then my goal is to write on Friday. It spills into Saturday. I have a hard time letting the sermon go. I was thinking this past week though, I have a familiarity enough with the languages that I'm comfortable in them. However, I do feel like that because I'm not more prepared in the language as I wish I was, I do work slower, and I am doing a lot more checking of my work. Just kind of bouncing it off of others. I read probably more commentary than I should, just to I'm checking my work to see where there's points of agreement and disagreement. So it takes me longer, I think, than I would like it to.
Yeah, I think for me, I use commentaries much later in the process, you know, and not that much. And a lot of that is, like you say, it's to check my work. It's just to make sure I haven't taken a misstep. Now, if there's a fundamental issue that's not clear to me early on, I'll write up my own best guess, and then I'll check a commentary or two that I trust early on to sort of adjust my spine if I need to have my spine adjusted. But other than that, and I would say most weeks that doesn't even happen. Other than that, I'm leaving it to the end. And I think if you listen to the sermon, there won't be much in there that's come from commentary. Sometimes literally nothing.
Yeah.
But it's good to try to be responsible and make sure that I'm not coming up with weird things, just by my own private study of the text. And as you say, showing your work to others and then reading commentaries could be a very helpful way to make sure you don't get any unique readings of Scripture, which we're not looking for.
Yeah, and I do feel like if you look at my study notes and then look at the manuscript, you would say you spent a lot of time there, but much of those notes didn't go into the sermon.
Yeah.
I want to get my arms around the text and feel that I'm not going to stop the reading until I feel comfortable that it makes sense to me and the objections and concerns that I have. And I just kind of feel like if it can make sense to me, then I'm ready to work on a part of it to explain it to others.
Yeah. And I feel like when I'm preparing a sermon, that I want to be able not only to have that sermon, but I want to be standing at the door afterwards ready to answer questions that I think the text will provoke.
Sure.
So there's always a certain amount of study that I know it's going beyond the sermon, but it's like the questions I know are going to be raised by this sermon because I stand at the door for quite a while afterwards, and I just know I'm going to get questions.
Sure. And if you've said everything you know about the text in the sermon, then you really didn't do your homework.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. Well, HB, I could talk to you forever, brother, but I think that's about our time. Thank you again for agreeing to be part of Together for the Gospel. You've been a wonderful part of it. Your preaching is an encouragement. And we're going to get together again, Lord willing, in April of 2022 in Louisville, Kentucky. People should be able to go to the website, t4g.org, and register. And Lord willing, we're going to get to hear you preach God's word again there.
And sing hymns together.
Amen. Good hymns.
Good hymns. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, HB.
Da-da.